Welcome to Accreditation Conversations. I'm your host, Amy Dykins, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by Dr. Vince Arario. Vince, you and I have been friends for a while. We go back to the Weave Online days, for those listeners who remember Weave Online.
Yes, we do.
And I know it's been a while, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
And it's been a lovely journey along the way. It really has, and we've had some wonderful conversations. And I appreciate you being on the podcast today to share some of that experience with our listeners. I know that when we were at the SAC-COC conference, you and I had a chance to sit down and chat for a few minutes, and you had some very interesting tidbits to share that I thought, you know what, let's do this as a podcast. So thanks for joining us.
Well, you're welcome, Amy, and glad to be here.
Yeah. So to get us started, let's get everybody caught up a little bit to where we are. Can you share with us a little bit about how a chiropractor comes to be an institutional effectiveness leader on campus?
Well, that's certainly a great question and a good one, because as you mentioned, my career started in chiropractic. I graduated way back when in 1979 and practiced for 27 years. And I had a great career and it was exciting. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, I injured my wrist, and which prevented me from doing my work on a day-to-day basis without being in pain myself. And the real thought there was, well, how can you continue to help folks if you're not willing to help yourself? So it was like, needed to follow my own advice. So the hard decision was made, and I left my desired career in early 2007. And being still very young in my early 50s, I said, well, how else can I help or be useful? Because we all want to have a purpose in life. And I looked around at the things that I was doing. I mean, I was very active in the State Chiropractic Association. I had been doing some politics, working with the chiropractic profession to pass legislation. And I thought, well, that's possible. I could be a lobbyist or, continue to work in that area. But that really didn't fit the bill. And so I looked around, and being in Atlanta, there was a small college, university, which was Life University, which also had a very large chiropractic program. And I checked their employment website, and I saw that there were some positions open. I said, well, maybe there's something I could do there. So I made application to become the director of quality assurance. And that role had to do with working in their clinic system, because we had an outpatient clinic system. And the responsibilities lied around documentation of patient records, which is what I did every day in practice. And the real challenge was, does your documentation rise to the level that supports the billing and the claims that you're making? Because if it does, you'll get paid. And if it doesn't, you don't. And it's the same thing with accreditation. If you're compliant, great, get a nice green light. If you're not, you'll get the stop. Wait a minute, we need more data. So that actually, I was hired, and I did that role for 4 years. And it was, we were having some issues with our accreditor in the documentation. We cleared them all up under my watch. We put some really great processes in place, and obviously I was doing a good job because I was asked to be considered when the role came open for the Director of Institutional Effectiveness, to consider and apply to that position, which I did. And I was appointed, and I've been in that position since 2011. And so it's been a long journey, a learning process along the way, and it's been great. So that's how you go
Excellent. Thank you.
One area to another.
Yeah, it's so interesting, too, how backgrounds in so many other areas. I was a hospital administrator before I became an accidental academic, right? Mm-hmm. But it's these backgrounds and experiences that bring so much depth and richness to the way that folks can apply to accreditation, institutional effectiveness kind of thinking.
Sure.
And I love talking to folks about their journeys into this area, because I have yet to talk to anybody who was like, well, I was in high school and the guidance counselor said, you'd be a really great institutional effectiveness Right. It's not something we grow up to be, right? But it is something that it feels like when it's done really well, in my experience, it's done by folks that come from a background where they've had lots of, relationship building with people, right? They're talking to people on campus in all different kind of places and in ways that they're operating across the institution, and so it's a lot of times drawing on experiences like you came from a clinical background that you were able to then apply to this. It feels like so. I appreciate that background.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's been interesting. The networking is really important because not everybody understands assessment one way, and there's many ways to do assessment. And as we, go through life, we're looking at things, observing things. You're assessing, what is that? And so you try to relate to the individual where they're coming from, and I think the biggest key is having patience, because, it's not. You do it once and you do it right. You do it once and you keep inventing it because it's a continuous improvement activity. And so it's lifelong learning for sure.
Yeah. I like that you talk about this as you came from quality assurance, continuous improvement. Can you say just a little bit more about that kind of philosophy of this is continuous improvement? It's not one and done.
No, and SACS pretty much makes that clear in their accreditation standards that it's an ongoing process. You need to set your goals, you need to set your objectives. You have to measure the degree that we've met those, and then what are we going to use from that data that we collected to either inform the program or make improvements. And so it's an ongoing process, and I really like that. I mean, it's I think we all strive in one way or another to do better the next time around. So.
Excellent. It's a great attitude for sure, especially when you're talking about things like an organization where you're impacting students, so strongly, right? Like we want to do better. In my experience, the folks that we work with on campuses, they really truly care tremendously about their students. And like you said, they want to do better. That's been my experience. So you talked a little bit about networking. And so I'm going to also ask you to share a little bit about, in your role, you're responsible for assessment reporting, but you're not the person who is necessarily doing the assessment reporting. And you've shared with me that you work with a committee. I thought it would be nice if you could surface for folks a little bit. What does that structure look like? How does that committee function as a part of your institutional effectiveness role with you?
Sure. Well, as a director and an office of one, which when you're at a small institution, that many is the case, you have all the responsibilities, but not a lot of help. So I oversee the IE process on campus. And so we've created a very good process that's well written. We have a handbook, we distribute it, and then I guide the individuals that are part of the process through working it and being successful. So like most institutions, it's an annual review process. So we start with collection of a plan for assessment at the beginning of our academic year, which begins October 1, and we're on a quarter system. So we move kind of fast. So we have our fall, winter, spring, and even a summer quarter. But we allow this project coordinators and others that are responsible for submitting assessment reports, we give them the summer to kind of compile all their data, take a review of it, a backwards look, and then answer the questions and submit a final report by September 30th, at which time then I engage our Institutional Planning Evaluation Committee, which is known as IPEC, and then that's grouped by individual assessment people who have submitted reports themselves. They get to review in a team of 3 other submitted projects. And then they give feedback utilizing a rubric as to how well they performed on the metrics. And that's more about process. I mean, since we do use the Weave platform, we're recording the Weave goals, our objectives, whether they're student learning or administrative or educational support. We describe the measures. How do we know when we've actually met our objective? We set a target, and we do that analysis of the findings that are submitted and all that. And so the rubric follows that. Do they have a mission? Do they have goals? Are the objectives well laid out? Are the measures fully descriptive? And so that rubric is used to guide it. And so during that fall quarter, I have generally about 50 units that are reporting. So I work with the team and we develop the feedback, and then it's always my goal to get the feedback to them before our winter break, which is usually the third week in December. This way they can digest it, review it, make tweaks to the next plan, and then start the process all over again. So I do use the committee members and from all over the campus, and they generally enjoy it because they learn the process better. They see they get the idea. Oh, and the biggest light bulb that went off this time around was I had an associate dean join us, and she kept saying, "Boy, I see how if they don't tell their story properly, we're not going to be able to understand it." And that's the takeaway. It's you're not writing these reports for yourself because you already know it. You have to write it so somebody else knows it, because ultimately, a SACS review is going to be reading these IE reports and answering the question, did the institution write their goals and objectives, measure the degree that they've met them, and use that information to make improvement? And if, at the end of the day, if you can show the connection, then you can say you're compliant in that area. So,
nice. Yeah, that's really important too. You're surfacing something there that I think is easy to lose sight of, both in accreditation, but also, as you said, even in an internal committee, we make assumptions that other people understand our program or our programs at a level of depth that very likely they do not, right? They're paying attention to their own thing. Even if they're at your institution, they still don't necessarily have all the same kind of context that you have about the program.
Right.
And so being able to have a success story like that's it's pretty compelling, but it also speaks very highly to the process that you've put together, that then you're preparing folks to be able to very comfortably talk about their story with a reviewer. You're sharing that later. It isn't necessarily something that you're getting into emergency mode the day before, like, oh, somebody wants to talk to me. Like, they've already been practicing that over time with each other.
Exactly.
So I like that. Yeah. So this might be a dangerous question, but I'll go ahead and ask you anyway. You had a success story there that you were sharing with us. Are there other assessment success stories that you could share?
Yeah, one comes to mind, and I some people that are involved in assessment of an area, they weren't chosen because they knew how to assess. They were chosen because they had knowledge in the particular area that they were working. So the one area that I'll talk about is we have a career services department on campus, and this one individual has been at the campus in various roles, but she arose to this about the time that I started IE. And, we got together and we said, okay, it's time for your annual report, and these are the things that you need to accomplish. And it just was like deer in the headlights. It was like, as I do not get it, I don't understand it, I'll try it. And so every year, she just, I hate this. I can't do it. I can't do it. And, so each year we'd sit down again at the end of the year and say, well, you can do this thing, you can do this. And finally, after about 6 years, it just hit her. Boom. She said, I got it. She says, it makes sense now. I'm putting it together, and thank you so much for your help. And it was so great to see that happen, that transition. But what happened next was that her supervisor rolled up her report into hers, so she didn't have to do it anymore. And I turned around and I said, after all these years you've been trying to do it, and now you don't have to do it. I said, well, at least you got it. So
yeah. Well, and at that point, maybe the supervisor too recognizes, okay, you understand it now. let's move you on to something else, right? Like
Yeah.
they got a competency and they've achieved that.
Yeah.
It also speaks to patience, like you said earlier, right?
Yes.
Again, meeting people where they're at, again, is so incredibly important. And having patience, this is not, we speak a whole other language in institutional effectiveness and assessment and teaching and learning that sometimes I think folks assume that others understand what you're talking about, but they're not immersed in it. Just like I can't go into a physics class and automatically understand everything that the physics professor is saying. We have a
Right.
particular discipline that we're experts in. So this is an accreditation conversations podcast. And so while assessment and especially in SACCOC accreditation, incredibly important, to all institutions. But when you're thinking about preparing for the SACCOC accreditation, you have to be thinking about that pretty hard and have everything ready to go. Are there other accreditations other than the SACCOC accreditation process that you have participated in?
Yes. We have some programmatic accreditors. One of them covers our largest program, which is the chiropractic degree. And the accreditor there is the Council on Chiropractic Education. And so I'm intimately involved with that accreditation process as well, not only because of my background as a chiropractor, but because the assessment of that is so large. We have roughly 1,900 students in that one program, where some of the other undergraduate programs are very small, maybe 20, 30, or as many as 100. So that's a large one. We also have Ascend, which is for our nutrition and dietetics. And we also have had Katie, which is for athletic training. And so I've dealt with all of them and on different levels. SACS and the CCE have been the most integrated with me. On the other two, I'll usually be asked to be interviewed by the site teams just to ask what is the process, does it apply to all the programs, et cetera. So they're looking for it that way. But generally on SACS and the CCE accreditation, I'll be involved in writing and gathering the evidence, and I'm really the technical expert when it comes to weave and getting the data there. So I work hand in hand with the liaison to collect all the reports and then get it into weave and connect all the pieces and make sure that when we're done, it all works.
Nice. So in those programmatic accreditations, especially the smaller ones that you spoke about, who's the main lead on accreditation like that on your campus?
Our main accreditation lead is the accreditation liaison, and they take that role for every accreditor. And they do all the substantive and change. Of course, there's the content experts have to provide the data, but he has the knowledge and expertise to guide them to tell their story, because it's all about, we have standards. You need to follow the standards. It's you write to the standard. And then once you tell your story and you make the case for being compliant, do you have the paper trail that leads to that? It's the document. It all comes down to the documentation, supplying the right evidence.
Yeah. Excellent. So it sounds like over the years that you've had at various levels a lot of experience in accreditation. But when we were at SACCOC, you shared with me that you had not previously been a site reviewer. Is that correct?
Yes, I did have the opportunity to do that as recently as last year as a full-fledged site reviewer. I chose to do that or accept the invitation because it's an invitation from our VP in the SACS area. And all the, senior administrators are on a list that's kept up to date by our liaison. And when the SACS specifically is looking to fill slots, because there's a couple of hundred site reviews going on every year, and each vice president has a lot on their table. So they need people in all areas they usually pick you in your area of expertise. So I think I really got on the list was our decennial review, was we were in the class of 2021. And in preparation for that, my liaison asked me if I wanted to go on a site visit as an observer. And it would, create that opportunity to see what happens, and give you the perspective from the other side. And it would help us be more prepared for our own site visit. So I said, yes, that sounds like a great idea. I mean, I hope to learn something and bring back information that was important. Well, that was just before COVID hit. And so when my observer role was supposed to be engaged, COVID hit, everything shut down as far as actual site visits. We weren't sure what was going to happen, but we did roll into a virtual site visit. And I did go on that one. Actually, two. One was started and that fell apart, and I had to go on another one. And it was all virtual, but the work was the same. You get to participate and see all the documentation that's provided for the offsite, and then since I was supposed to be on the onsite, then you have to again look at the documentation that way, and you're part of the dialogue that's occurring with the site team. And you hear the questions, what's being raised, and you're looking at the evidence and hearing the story. And it was very, very enlightening. It really expanded my knowledge of the process, made me more comfortable to be involved in it, especially on the receiving side, when most of us we're afraid of, oh, we've got this going on. And again, it's that networking, it's that ability to dialogue and be sure that what you are doing is right. And raise the question if you have them, and ultimately you get the job done. And I think that what, I feel that as a site team reviewer now, in my past experience, the institution, we want the institution to be compliant. You want them to be successful, just like we want our students to be successful. Do they have the tools? Maybe they don't. Maybe they haven't been asked the right question. So you look for, all right, they've supplied this, but maybe they are doing it. Ask another question, ask another way to say, did you do this? And then that gives you the opportunity to interact with the institution more and make sure and see if they are doing what they should be doing. And if they are, at the end of the day, that's great. That's what we'd like. So it was very rewarding. Both not for the knowledge gained and the people that I met. I had a great team lead, and it was nice to work with the liaison. I met folks from, just retired to the young professionals that are just entering the field, experts in student affairs to the finances and human resources, and and the faculty credentialing. So I got to see a lot more than you would in your own area, and so that I did feel that was rewarding. And I chose to do it because everything I've done as I approach my later years and head towards retirement, I said, well, I've worked towards this. Why not do it? Why not give back? And that's. I felt good about it. Yeah. And I'm still on the list, so I may be invited again.
Excellent. And I love hearing that you have moved into that area of being a site reviewer, because I know, again, we have a long history together, and I know you have so much great experience. Having peers volunteer, it takes you away from your campus, it takes you away from other important responsibilities, but it is so incredibly important to the authentic process of accreditation. Think about how hard we all work on campus preparing for that visit. If you don't have site visitors that then are also vested in the process, bring great experience, are bringing their ability to really be a true, not just somebody who can read and make a judgment, but somebody who comes with the expertise to be able to say like, oh, it looks like you're doing a really great job here, where it's validating and saying, you know, I see some opportunities for you to be stronger here, is adding value, right? And so bringing that to the table in the years of experience that you've had to being a site visitor, I feel like was one of those opportunities that I'm really glad that somebody out there, one of those VPs at SACS-COC, did a good job, Vince. And so thank you for putting your time into that, though. Not everybody does.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. And you started to talk about your accreditation liaison on campus.
Mm-hmm.
So you, as the institutional effectiveness leader, are not your accreditation liaison for Life University. Can you talk a little bit about that, the dynamic? You're working with somebody else who is the accreditation liaison, not the institutional effectiveness person. A lot of places they are the same person, not always, but a lot of places they are. So could you talk about that a little bit for us?
Yes. Our accreditation liaison has a long history working with accreditation documentation. I think he's filled that role on our campus since 2004 when he started at the campus. And he just has this unique ability to digest the content as an excellent writer and can tell the story really, really well. To give that position to someone else when you have such a credible asset, would be, a mistake in my opinion. So his role initially did include IE as when he was a vice president in that, and then as things change on most campuses, there's reorganization and they put you somewhere else. So he became the BPAA, but also maintained the liaison position. So I was asked to do the liaison at one point, but I didn't think I was the right person for it. So he continues in that role, and I support that position heavily because I know the incredible responsibilities that it entails and all the detail that goes into it. And we both have the same skill set. We're both organized, detail-oriented, and we collect the data. We know how to catalog it and make sure that we can get to it when we need it. So as a result of that, we've, being similar, we've had many of conversation, become close friends over the years. And, we respect each other, for our own talents and each other's. And it's been a nice working relationship. And so he leaves the bringing it all together within Weave to me. He goes, because I've worked with Weave, like you said, from Weave Online days. So we've had Weave on our campus since 2012, 2013. And it came about as far as, seeing it at a SACS conference. Our liaison saw the product and said, this was put together. They do what they say they do. and they said it's wonderful. And so we've stayed on that platform. We've looked at others, but this platform has worked really well. And, we appreciate all the hard work Weave has put into it because it makes our job easier. The platform is consistent. So thank you on that.
Yeah, thank you. I love that. Mm-hmm. So you working with somebody where you have this really tight relationship is what makes it work, really. You've got an institutional effectiveness expert who is paired with somebody who has the accreditation story thinking down pat. And then together you're working very, very closely to make sure that when you get ready to submit, you have all of the evidence ready at your fingertips. So that reviewers are happy and you're happy as a result. Mm-hmm. You said something to me recently. You said that you make his life better. Tell me a little bit more about the work that you do. What is it that in your role you feel like if I am able to do these things well, it means that we're ready for accreditation. It means that the liaison's job is easier.
Well, with IE, the biggest key is the documentation of program assessment. So as I did mention before, there's 52 units that are reporting. So my responsibility is that to ensure that those reports are submitted and reviewed every year. So there are those there, between people leaving, people starting, and then you have to work with the new person and train them on, what is this assessment job that they've been asked to do because it's not teaching, it's an add-on to teaching. So they get a stipend to be that program coordinator and do this job. And they may or may not have any background in that. So I'm working with them to bring them up to speed, at the same time making sure the whole process is ongoing so that we always have a catalog of reports. You just don't get to your decennial, you submit it and stop. It's an ongoing thing. And so that you're always ready and you're always collecting the data and that you're always ready to report it. So, one of the things is to have, show a progression that you've been doing this over time. So that's my role, is to make sure that I'm collecting the data, cataloging all the reports, giving all the feedback, working with the new ones, ensuring that we have that. And that makes the liaison's job a lot better, easier, because they don't have to think about, is this getting done? Because it is getting done, because that's my problem.
Are we going to have what we need?
Right.
Like the last minute fire drill, is that going to happen? Or
correct. And I guess I've learned a lot, by attending SOX conferences every year on an annual basis. I've done that. That's been my training. I've also attended the SOX Summer Institutes for other areas as well. I serve on the assessment councils, which you've mentioned before. I've served on academic council to bring that information in. So I have a broad knowledge of the institution by working with all these various constituents. And so knowing where the data is very helpful when you're scrambling at the end for, I'm missing this. Where is it? Oh, I know where it is, and I can get to it. So that revolves. And I think, we touched on the responsibilities of the assessment council and IE, I play an advisory role there because of my knowledge in just overall assessment. The faculty, are the course content expert. They're the content experts, and they get to, there's the academic freedom and how they, assess their students and things. But the assessment council's role is really to always constantly improve and evaluate what we're doing. Is there a better way? Can we improve on that? And so their primary responsibility now is to look at the course learning outcomes, look at the program learning outcomes. Do we have the appropriate measures in place? Are these learning outcomes stated in the best way? Are we using, best practices? And it's great to listen to people like the various assessment gurus that are out there. And I want to remember her name, Susan Lutke. Lutke, and she's been, we've has programs with her. We've also hired as a consultant Sherry Barrett, who just has a book that's released, and she's been on campus and is working with our faculty to go through learning outcomes and reviewing them at each course level. So I think it's just as long as you work with everybody to help them succeed in this area that they may not have been specifically trained in, to improve on that. And it's been exciting that way. So that's our role there.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and I love that what you have just described is a lot of best practices around building an assessment culture that's supportive. It's not punitive, right? It's really about improvement. There is a lot of scaffolding that I hear there in experiences that folks are having around this, so that the dialogue continues, that it's not something that is, emergency SACS is coming next year. Let's all pretend we do assessment, right? It's very authentic, the conversations that you continue to have on this ongoing basis. And again, in the end, you're prepared for accreditation, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not that accreditation is the means to the end, rather the assessment and the improvement for students means that you then have evidence of having done that work well. So if you are new in this field today, Vince, and you were just, I've become an assessment director or an IE person, what advice would you have for me?
Listen, and network with
Nice.
other individuals that are involved in assessment. The networking opportunities at the SACS conferences are can't be replaced. They have specific luncheons at each of the annual conferences that are designed to sit with other individuals that do the same role at your institution. And I've learned a lot from those conversations, and you get to communicate with them both at the conference and then communicate afterwards. We have listservs that are constantly being populated with questions. How do you do this? Or what? Hey, I'm new to this. What do you recommend? And there's a bunch of resources that are shared that way in that venue. Attending the not only the annual but the summer workshops for SACS, and then there's plenty of reading material. My motto is always never reinvent the wheel, because somebody's probably done it before you. Go out there and seek their advice and read up on what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and get the help that's so willing to be given to you, because everyone shares. I mean, it's, someone says, well, I do it this way, and you do it a different way. And they say, well, that's a great idea. Do you mind if I try that? And they say, of course, and they'll even give you handbooks and manuals and rubrics, and it's all a sharing experience, which is, we're all in this together, which is nice. And I found that to be. So my advice is just listen, network, get involved with accreditation activities, get involved with assessment activities. There's conferences all over the U.S., and just have to get the dollars from in the budget to do it. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate having you on today. You've shared a lot of your experience, and I know that I hope that we can continue the dialogue as well. If somebody wanted to get in touch with you, if they wanted to continue a conversation with you, what would be the best way to do that?
Certainly reach out by email. My email is Vince, VINCE .ERARIO @life.edu. And I'll be happy to connect. We can always have a conversation via phone or Teams or something of that nature. Enjoying the ability to share and give back.
Thank you so much.